Gideon vs. Wainwright, 1963. Analysis of case. Introduction. Gideon vs. Wainwright was a landmark case in the history of the United States Supreme Court. The case commenced in 1961 when Clarence Earl Gideon was accused of burglary from the pool hall in Panama City, Florida. Gideon claimed that he could not afford a lawyer during the first trial and asked the authorities to appoint an attorney to represent him. However, the judge told him that the state only provides lawyers to unprivileged citizens whose crimes might potentially lead to the death penalty. As a result, the defendant was sentenced to 5 years, yet Gideon was indignant about the conditions and filed a petition titled habeas corpus to the Florida Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the state court denied it, forcing Gideon to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1963, U.S. Supreme Court unanimously declared that Gideon's conviction was unconstitutional because the defendant lacked an attorney at the trial. Therefore, the court ruled that an indictee is eligible to have a state law as per the Sixth Amendment. Before a high trial, the Supreme Court justice represented Gideon, stating that he was not educated enough to defend himself. The right to have unrestricted legal counsel at the trial became fundamental in state courts across the country. Case outline. Title of the case: Gideon vs. Wainwright. Facts of the case. Clarence Earl Gideon was charged with robbery of money from the vending machines in Panama City, Florida. The state court declined to provide the defendant with a lawyer, claiming that only indigent indictees were eligible for this service. Gideon was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Later, he filed a petition for a release due to an unfair sentence. The Florida Supreme Court rejected it, while the U.S. Supreme Court decided to view it. The U.S. Supreme Court decreed that according to the Sixth Amendment, any person charged with a felony can receive a state attorney. History of the case. Back then, Florida did not have an opportunity to provide the defendants with lawyers. The accused individuals were to represent themselves during the trials. Only poor defendants who committed severe crimes leading to the death penalty were eligible for an attorney appointment. Legal question. Does the Sixth Amendment's right to a criminal defense attorney extend to felony defendants in state courts? Decision or holdings. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled out that state courts must appoint an attorney to any defendant charged with a felony. Its decision was in favor of a defendant, Clarence Gideon. The court also determined that criminals are typically poorly educated, thus, they need a representative to defend their interests. Verdict and opinion. The opinion regarding the verdict was unanimous, since there were several other cases related to the appointment of legal counsel. There were 3 concurring opinions suggested by Justices Clark, Douglas, and Harlan. No dissenting opinions were presented during the case discussion. The final verdict was authored by Justice Hugo L. Black and was constitutionally correct. Conclusion. The case has significantly impacted the development of the Sixth Amendment and its application to state courts. The U.S. Supreme Court introduced an utterly innovative idea for solving criminal justice problems. It was a good decision because the citizens of Florida, as well as citizens of other states, received a new fundamental right. It also overturned previous cases of unfair imprisonment and granted a retrial to several of them.